You may spend every day driving the same boring roads, going to the same bar with the same people, shopping at the same grocery store where you know all the employees and their families, waving good morning at the same neighbors you grew up with and now work with, and on the drive home, you daydream of leaving, going somewhere exciting, somewhere you don't know anyone. And if the town is perfect enough, you may even think of disappearing. This is the story of Atsumi Yoshikubo.
Hello everybody and welcome to True Crime Banter, the podcast aimed at bringing you your dose of murder relaxation. So just sit back and enjoy. It's all in good fun. It's all
Get out of here.
I gotta perfect that. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to the True Crime Banter YouTube channel.
Hi, everyone.
And another episode of the True Crime Banter podcast.
Yep.
If you guys don't know, we do a whole different intro on our actual podcast.
Yeah.
Like the long version, it's a third of our name. It says banter, and we got a bit of banter in today's episode.
Yep.
If you guys have left comments, if you guys have left reviews, you may or may not be shouted out in that bit of banter. So feel free, if you guys want to hear that, go over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, and check it out. Maybe you guys got shouted out. And also in today's bit of banter, we played a little music game, little musical trivia.
Yeah, a little music quiz.
Yeah, and I will say,
You try to trip me up.
You may or may not have done pretty bad.
You may have to go see how terrible I did.
Yeah.
Or great.
It was fun, though.
Yeah.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. So if you guys want to see that, feel free to go listen to the full podcast version.
Yep.
But if you're not into that, I guess,
Yeah.
if you're here for just a true crime, 2/3 of our name.
That's okay, too.
You came to the right place because here we are.
All three of us. You can't see him now, but little
you can't see
Tito.
him. Oh.
Yeah, he's sleepy.
Well, little McGeets, why don't you wake up, because
if you also want to be comfy and come hang out with us, feel free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But without further ado,
today's
case covered by you is the story
of Atsumi Yoshikubo.
Oh.
Yes.
And here we go.
Here we go. Yellowknife is a city in the Northwest Territories in Canada. It's a very small town, and if you drove through, would remind you of any small icy town that survives on trades like lumber and fishing, and is indeed one of those towns where everyone knows each other, like we often hear. Every year, though, this boring little town gets a big boom of tourism when people travel from all over to view the Aurora Borealis, also known as the Northern Lights. If you don't know what that is, go look it up real quick and come back. Among the crowds that flock to view the lights are primarily a large number of Japanese tourists that come in big groups and go on tours together, eat together, and stay in the same lodge together. What you usually don't see is a young Japanese woman traveling alone. But that's exactly what Atsumi Yoshikubo was doing on October 19th, 2014. Atsumi had been in Yellowknife for only a few days when she decided to explore the local visitor center and asked the front desk about tours for the upcoming light show. She was a young doctor, so this vacation away was going to be a fun little reset before heading back to Japan. Unfortunately, Atsumi didn't know that visiting during October was just a tad too early, and almost all tours aren't active until the winter months. Video footage shows her entering the building, all dressed up in a pink puffer coat and pink hat, looking around and most likely trying to find someone to help her. Once she realized the tours weren't running, she left and went to a little art gallery down the road. Here, Video footage shows Atsumi talking and laughing with people at the check stand, where she politely asked them to wrap up 2 coffee mugs for her that she had purchased. What she did the rest of the day is unknown, but what we do know is 3 days later, Atsumi is seen leaving her hotel at 9:15 a.m. on foot, once again dressed in her pink parka and pink hat and scarf. Carrie Reel, a local woman who actually worked in law enforcement, was running back home to grab something on her way to work when she passed by who she now knows later as Atsumi. Carrie said it was not hard at all to notice the woman because she was dressed head to toe in bright pink and she was very pretty. Carrie said she briefly thought about turning around to offer her a ride or help because it was so cold out, but Atsumi looked very bundled up and content, so she traveled on. She did find it odd, though, that she was walking alongside a long road heading out of town by herself. Another eyewitness, Sonia Daigle, was a Northern Lights tour guide, but was actually in training, so her and a couple other people were practicing their driving route when she spotted Atsumi as well. She stuck out because of her bright pink outfit, but Sonia found it weird that Atsumi was headed down a long road that basically led nowhere. Being a local, Sonia knew where there was really nothing down the road that Atsumi was on except a trash dump. Atsumi was seen with the camera though, so maybe she wanted pictures and was just exploring the area. Both witnesses took note but never reported the walking woman, and with that, life resumed. Until...
Good evening, I'm Juanita Taylor. RCMP and Yellowknife are looking for a missing tourist from Japan. Atsumi Yoshikubo has shoulder-length black hair and brown eyes. She's approximately 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighs about 100 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to call Yellowknife RCMP or Crime Stoppers.
So she went missing.
Atsumi's family and friends hadn't heard from her for a couple days back home, and they started to worry. She also missed her checkout time at the hotel and never showed for her flight. They called local Yellowknife authorities, and almost immediately a search began. A missing woman traveling alone from another country was not something they saw every day, and if they knew she had already been missing for a couple days, any time they had left was running out. Carrie Reel, the eyewitness driving to work who spotted her, heard about the disappearance on the local radio and knew she had to phone the police. This gave the authorities a decent timeline and location to start at. Carrie did a small interview for the local Yellowknife paper and speaks about how she dealt with and currently still deals with massive regrets. She said since then, she's never doubted that little voice in her head. Quote, "If I ever come across that scenario again in my life, there is no doubt I will stop and try to help." End quote. And I saw a video of her and you can see she's super sad. In her eyes, you can see it. She just spaces out for a bit when she's talking about it. It's really sad.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of another case we covered where a little boy, not a little boy, but teenage boy in Germany. I'm blanking on the name right now.
Tristan Brubeck?
Yes, exactly. And there was eyewitnesses of him with a stranger in the park, at the bus or train station.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like people knew of him.
Right.
But it's a little too little too late, I guess.
Of course, yeah. At this point, there was a few theories going around. Most people were hopeful, thinking maybe she got lost and had found some kind of shelter. But the vast empty land surrounding Yellowknife didn't really provide a lot of areas to sleep or stay out of the cold. Some thought she accepted a ride from someone and had been kidnapped, but hopefully still alive. Some thought she found herself wandering off the path and got hurt and maybe was somewhere and needed help. Human trafficking wasn't unheard of in this area as well, so some thought that possible too. At this point, they just needed eyes in the air and on foot searching anywhere they could. Back home in Japan, the story had completely blown up overnight. Her family spoke with Japanese media about feeling helpless and stuck when she was so far away. Yellowknife media was sending all the footage they could back to Japan to share over there. Meanwhile, searchers expanded their areas of search until all leads were exhausted. 2 weeks in, the search was called off. Local media said she was presumed dead at this point. It was now a body recovery mission. The lead investigator, Eleanor Sturko, gave a press statement telling people, quote, "Our investigation has determined that she arrived in Yellowknife with the plan to go into the wilderness alone and become a missing person, and that she took steps to avoid being found." End quote. What do you think about that?
What would steps to avoid being found mean? Granted,
Right.
this is in a environment that I don't know about really.
Mm-hmm.
In North America, like very.
It basically looks like Alaska up there, yeah.
I don't know if there's common things that when someone goes missing you would look for or are typically found, whether it's footsteps or, I guess just items left behind.
Right.
What kind of steps would be taken to cover up being found? Like going off?
I mean, this is all stuff that everyone was asking too.
Yeah. Like what?
Maybe things like leaving your phone at the hotel or something, something like that, where like no one can get a hold of you.
And what year did this take place
2014?
again?
Yeah,
okay.
2014.
Yeah, so that's very recent. So yeah, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But granted, is there cell coverage out there?
Right.
I don't.
Yeah.
If there's no cell coverage, she's probably got her own personal camera to take photos with or something like that. So yeah, I would like to know, do they cover or go into these steps to not be found,
right,
per se?
Right. Well, we'll get into that.
Ooh.
So the statement that the police department released that I just read basically caused a shit show, and nobody even knew what that meant. What does that even mean? Right? Everyone was like, "What?" So you purposely made yourself go missing? Why? And why like this? Why in Yellowknife, so far from home?
Yeah.
Why buy the mugs then from the gift shop? So everyone was like, what? What are you even talking about? Local reporters even felt weird about even speaking about it on TV because they didn't even think that it made sense. But also, what should they believe? Like, there's nothing you can really go off of if the police aren't telling you anything. But also, it's really, unless it's like a public safety concern, it's really like not your business. Like, just because you want to know doesn't mean you deserve to know.
Yeah, you don't have a right to know.
Someone else who wasn't sure what to believe was Atsumi's brother. He stated he was hearing more about her case from the media than from investigators. Someone came forward during this time and told investigators that Atsumi had written them a letter, and in that letter she had mentioned suicide. Atsumi's brother said nobody will tell him who she wrote that letter to or what the suicide was mentioned about, like how it was even talked about in the letter. He didn't believe her actions leading up to her disappearance matched that of someone with suicidal thoughts or intentions. During this time, the public was in a state of confusion. Once this mystery letter had come forward, it seemed as though the whole investigation just came to a stop. They wouldn't tell anyone why they thought it was a suicide or what led them to that decision. And now with the whole department going quiet, what was there to do?
Was the letter ever released?
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Back home in Japan, Atsumi's family was trying to live their life as normal as possible, even with all these lingering questions. The family wasn't exactly a tight-knit group, so they weren't sure what to think or even where to start. Atsumi's brother was interviewed for a documentary and really shed some light on who this missing woman was, or who he thought she was. Growing up, Atsumi was a quiet and studious girl. She was always reading and had a small group of girls that she hung out with. One of her friends said, quote, "She didn't mind the sight of blood. We thought she would be a doctor like her dad." End quote. After high school, Atsumi left her small countryside town to go to medical school where she became a psychiatrist. She moved back home and worked in the same building as her father, where she saw patients for a little while, until one day she just wasn't there anymore. She moved to a couple cities, only staying a short while before moving to another city and another clinic. It's said that she left some of these jobs so soon because of, quote, differences in management, end quote, whatever that means. During this time, Atsumi wasn't in contact with her family much except her mother, who she was always close with. There's quite a bit of mystery surrounding her upbringing, but all her brother has really said was, quote, "My brother and my sister and I were all raised very different, so we all turned out different," end quote. Atsumi eventually moved to Tokyo, a much bigger city and faster-paced life than her little hillside town. She ended up dating a member of a band that she liked and moving in with him for a bit. Her brother said, "Nobody even knew that she moved to Tokyo until one day she was just gone." This seems to be a pattern with Atsumi. She kept to herself and didn't tell anyone what she was doing or planning. She couldn't seem to sit still for too long. What's really sad about this whole thing, besides the fact that she's missing, is that she seemed to be so sweet and kind wherever she went, but nobody truly knew the real her, even her family. So when she went missing, nobody knew where to start or who to talk to. In this research, a suicidologist, which I didn't even know was a thing, somebody who studies suicide.
I'm sure there's
a
thing for everything nowadays.
And I would have never even guessed. So when they said that, I was like, whoa, that's a thing? That's just
like a specialist in suicide.
But something I didn't really think about is that there's cultural differences in suicide and how it's viewed.
Okay.
And how people accept it and why people do it and the methods. And it didn't even occur to me until doing this case. I was like, wow, there's a whole field on this.
I mean, especially her she's Japanese, you said?
Yeah.
There isn't that where that suicide forest exists.
So I'm going to get into that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good. People are saying, why would you travel so far to take your own life? Why not in Japan? Why do it like that? Well, he explains that in Japan, suicide isn't viewed as a sin or something bad. You know, there's exceptions to this, but overall, it's viewed as a solution to someone suffering. There's a suicide forest in Japan that is a popular spot for people to go and take their own life, quietly and away from the world. The concept of walking out into nature and being at peace before ending your pain is something common and understood. So the fact that Atsumi possibly walked out into nature and ended her life really isn't that impossible according to their history. Another doctor countered the argument that Atsumi was cheery and happy on CC footage with the locals that she met before disappearing. He stated in medical school, one of the first things they learn is, quote, "Beware the smiling depressant," end quote. For they have already made up their mind about dying. They are happy because peace is coming soon at their own hand. This, of course, is just another way of looking at all of this. The narrative has been, there's no way she could have done this. Why like this? Well, why not? It's unusual, but not impossible.
Right.
A year after she was last seen alive, the case came alive once more when a second search for Atsumi's remains was underway. The town of Yellowknife was shocked, thinking this case was never going to resurface. At the same time, the town was hopeful that finally there would be closure for her family, at least having some part of her, hopefully. August 31st, 2015. Human remains were located just north of Yellowknife. While DNA confirmation was months away, the pink jacket and other pink clothing items found near the bones were confirmed to belong to Atsumi. At this point, it was basically confirmed in everyone's mind. It wasn't until the following April 2016 that an actual confirmation came to the public and Atsumi's family that the bones were hers. The coroner that worked on her bones determined there was no evidence of foul play. With her remains found and seemingly no foul play at hand, the details of her case were finally made public. Going back to that mysterious letter that we were talking about earlier, the contents of them were finally revealed. Not everything, but at least the part about suicide.
Okay.
Quote, "It was her wish to die in the wilderness north of Yellowknife. In the letter, Miss Yoshikubo disclosed health issues and repeated job loss as factors in her decision to commit suicide," end quote. Even with some type of closure, if you want to call it that, investigators, coroner, and the public had so many questions. Sure, you've found some remnants of her, but with no evidence of anything, how can you really know what happened to her? Did an animal find her? Did she have a more elaborate plan, but perhaps she got hurt and died from exposure instead? And if she did get the chance to follow through with her plan, how did she even do it? As far as reports go, there's nothing about a rope being found on the body or anywhere near it, no gunshot wounds or anything. Maybe she took some type of sleeping pills and let the elements do the rest. One thing everyone agreed on, though, is that there will never be any answers. We will never know the truth. In her belongings, Atsumi had written a letter stating how beautiful Canada was and how she never wanted to leave. And if her body was ever found, keep her there, bury her there. And that's exactly what the town of Yellowknife did. They gave a final home to a woman most of them never actually met. A final home to a woman who, unbeknownst to them, traveled from far away from a big, busy city full of everything you could ever think of, and chose to spend her last days on Earth in their little town, wandering around, buying coffee mugs, visiting gift shops, all while knowing these are the last things she will lay her eyes on. Perhaps the doctor was right. Beware the smiling depressant. And that is the story of Atsumi Yoshikubo.
I got some weird vibes during this one.
Yes.
You kind of actually mentioned it as you were researching it, that it was almost not more personal for you, but maybe you felt something during your research a little bit more than like you were expecting to, because you knew of the case, but
I remember hearing about this one. I think Crime Junkie did it a while ago.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, all I remembered was, I mean, it's already a case that sticks out because this woman travels from far away and goes missing by herself.
Yeah.
And it's not like some young girl who ran away. It's like a doctor. She planned this trip and she went out there and she was doing very normal things, and then she just like started walking on a busy road into nowhere and then just wasn't seen again.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's fucking weird. Obviously it's weird, but all the things around it were so odd. And the more that I think the natural thing to do is suspect foul play, because that's where your mind goes as you try to find a solution.
Yeah.
It must have been someone that did something to her. It couldn't have been herself, because we would never do this. So we think she would never do this.
Yeah.
Because it's so obscure.
Because the answer, if it is suicide, suicide is typically, in our culture, something that you just do. You get it done.
You do, right? And it's like, oh, they must have been like super sad, or I would have never guessed. And that's one of the things that the suicidologist guy was talking about. He was Japanese. He was from Japan. And he was just talking about how like over there, he said it's usually an American thing to like, and I don't think he meant it like this, so I hope people don't take it personal. Like, if you go watch it, you'll see he was, like, not mean about it, but he said it's more of a show over here.
Right.
It's, like, done in the home or whatever, but he said over there, it's not, like, as sad or anything. Like, it is sad, but it's...
But you're doing it for yourself
It's a thing, yeah. They're like, wow, they must have been really sad. And they just, like, want to be away from everything and don't want to, like, put it on anyone. So they just, like, disappear into the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things when you were talking about, I guess, the announcements that the police were making about this, about how they suspect it to be a suicide, the note, I guess, makes sense if it mentions it and she's gone missing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, though, if this is Canada, right? They also don't have the same, like, Japanese culture of honoring during your suicide. So I was going to say it's kind of weird that they would assume suicide without something more pointing towards it. But the note, I guess, in my opinion, does.
When the whole thing was going on, they just said, we found a note, and then basically called off the search. So a lot of people that were interviewed about this case it almost came off as like they had suspicions about the investigation not so much her, because all it was mentioned, but also from the investigating standpoint, they can't tell you anything.
Yeah.
So all they can say is, we found a letter that mentions it, and we think
And that's kind of what we're leaning towards.
Yeah.
I will say one of the almost like, I don't want to say confusion throughout, or the questions that arise throughout the entire situation reminds me a lot of the Elisa Lam story, where it's foreign, person travels far away and all of a sudden goes missing.
Right.
And with her situation with like her Tumblr blog and stuff, it was like kind of ominous. Was it suicide? Was she planning this all along? Or that's a whole different situation.
The only thing I would say is really different about that, but obviously besides the circumstances, is that the video footage from Elisa Lam shows her being erratic.
Yes.
Versus where she's so normal, which is why people were even more confused. Yeah, I'm not going to say it's more expected in the Elisa Lam one. I get what you're saying. But you're like, oh, she's acting weird. Not sure. No wonder something ended up like being weird and happening.
Yeah.
Like, who knows what she was involved in, versus Atsumi was like talking to the check stand people, or she was shown laughing and making jokes, and everyone that they interviewed was like, she was so sweet and so kind.
Yeah, but I think, granted, again, different situation, the weird part of this story would be the fact that she's walking down basically a dead-end road to nothing. Not during Northern Lights time of the year.
And the second witness, Sonia, said that she had her camera, and her camera was not found, not anywhere that I could mention that I could see it. So that's also weird.
Yeah.
And also, we're always going to have the question of how she did it, because there's only so many ways you can do it out there. Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of put myself in the situation of the witnesses who saw her.
Yeah.
And we talk about it too. Like your dad is a person that his way to spend time is kind of explore.
Yeah.
Take the dirt road that probably leads to nowhere, but he doesn't know where.
He doesn't care. He just goes. Yeah.
He's a guy, so he's got different, not motives, but ability to, without being afraid. But maybe that could be what she's doing. Maybe she likes that stuff, and something did happen out there that we don't know about.
Right. And that's what people were saying was like, okay, even if she was suicidal, like, you don't know that she went out there to do that. She could have been suicidal and planned to do this when she got back home. Something could have happened to her when she was out there. And then people were saying, okay, you found a letter, but when was this from? Was this 10 years ago?
True.
Who did she even write it to? Was it a letter that she wrote? Was it a diary entry? Was it for herself? Exactly. But then you get some type of closure at the end when you find out that she has a note in her luggage stating, I want to die here, or keep me here, bury me here. I want to die in the wilderness of Yellen. Like, it's very stated out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where my conclusion to this, or my opinion to the conclusion is, she probably did.
Yeah.
Obviously it's different than what most people would do in our culture.
Yeah.
But,
and then you find out about her having such a sketchy job history.
Yeah.
And she wrote off basically her whole family. And no one was in contact with her. She just kept moving around. She couldn't hold down a job or a relationship. And maybe she didn't care about the relationship, whatever.
Yeah.
But as far as job goes, she couldn't hold anything down.
Yeah, it
then
feels
you,
weird.
As someone, sorry, go ahead.
No, continue.
I was going to say, as someone who's so smart, and then you go to Yellowknife and you're looking for light tours, but it doesn't start till December or November. Don't you think you would have
if
looked
you're
that
going
up?
there for the Northern Lights, then
and maybe
clearly
she went
a time
there.
Of the year.
She wanted to see that before she died, and she just was so focused on the whole plan of dying out there that she just didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
She just knew it's getting closer to winter, and how sad is that maybe that's what she wanted to see before she died and she couldn't. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that psychiatrist said, the same guy that said, beware the smiling depressant. People will look back and say they were so happy and they were fine. And
but that's because they have that relief.
They had made up their mind. Yeah, that they knew it was going to be gone soon. So things like buying coffee mugs make sense to them because why not? It's not like a why, it's a why not thing to them.
Yeah.
And that's what I was kind of telling you before we started recording was I really just thought this was like some accident happened or something. And then I'm like, oh, like what a sad, but also like kind of weird thing to like, you just kind of go about your life in your town. And Yellowknife, if you go look up pictures, is so small. And sorry, shout out Yellowknife, but so boring. It's the littlest, stinkiest town. And to think that somebody is planning and just thinks it's so beautiful and amazing, and she could have flown anywhere in the world. Yeah. And that's where she chose to spend her last day.
That's what
the crappiest little town.
That's where I was going to kind of get to was, you brought up the point about how it wasn't Northern Lights season per se. But when we looked up photos of this town and this area, and obviously when the Northern Lights are going on, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I said, it would be wild to be able to see this in person, like at least once.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, the photos that you see online, it's just nature. You don't think of it as like a town. It's mostly like people in tents going there specifically for this like event, right? So it's almost beautiful to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you break it down to like just the town,
right,
it's nothing great to talk about.
Right.
Unless it is that season.
But it's also kind of like Alaska, where if you can appreciate nothing, that's what it is. It's wide open spaces, bald eagles, bears.
Yeah, and I was just going to say it's
mountains, water, beautiful. It's untouched besides the town. Everything's untouched. Yeah. And people find a lot of beauty in that.
Yeah, and I don't want to like sound cheesy.
Yeah. But
it's almost like hauntingly beautiful the way that she goes. If this is the, how I'm viewing it, is how she chose to go out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I mean, could you pick a better way if that's your viewpoint on life? Like if you can appreciate, like you're saying, this rinky-dink town out in the middle of nowhere, that's where you choose to go, and then you can peacefully, hopefully, go.
Yeah. One of those doctors, too, mentioned the idea of her leaving her own country to do something like this when they do have that like suicide forest over there. He mentioned like she was somebody who like cut people out of her life. She didn't really have any friends. She would have relationships and cut them off, and then she didn't talk to any of her family at one point. I know I said she was close to her mom, but then eventually she cut her off too. So she had some things going on and she didn't share with anybody, which there's some kind of sad irony there because she's a psychiatrist. It's kind of this weird. And they said that she's somebody who cuts things out like that. They don't want to be a part of anything. They don't want to be a part of a family, a relationship, or whatever. And that could explain, too, why she left her job so often. She won't want to be a part of anything. And eventually, when you work with people, you kind of become close to them, things like that. And how he mentioned she might just want to be divorced from her culture entirely. So leaving the actual country would be like the ultimate I'm done here kind of thing. And yeah, that's the part that really got me was I'm looking at this picture of Yellowknife and I'm like, ugh, I would never like even go there.
Yeah.
Like
you're not going to waste your time.
No.
Let alone to like make your mark there.
Yeah. And sorry, shout out Yellowknife. You guys seem cool and all, but I'm like, no, I would never like take a vacation there except to see the lights, right? Yep. That's obviously amazing. It's one of the only places you can view the lights at that time of year anyway, is in Yellowknife. So I get it. But it's just so, like you said, haunting, that word, that this woman who had money and a good job, and that's where you're going to do it.
Yeah. It's almost like it was intentional. Almost.
Yeah.
The fact that it wasn't during that season, too. Like she wanted to almost be there alone in that nature with her own appreciation for it. And not just for the lights.
Yeah, and the vibe I get from watching the couple documentaries about this is when they interview the people and they take you through the streets and stuff, is these people have to be dreaming of something other than this. Like, they may live there and they may work there, but you have to think like they sit there maybe at dinner time or something, or when they're at their steel mill job or whatever, that they're like, I would love to go somewhere else. And
all right. Okay, well, thank you for that. that's been another episode of the True Crime Banter podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to follow us on Instagram. If there's anything you want to, I don't know, talk about, mention. Is there anything you want to...
I don't think so. No, just hit me up, y'all. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to end the
No.
I guess us discussing it with?
No, I think though, because this, just like some other things like crimes against children and stuff, is some of this stuff can be triggering to people, stuff that deals with sexual assault and everything. I know true crime podcasts in general can be triggering, but some people don't mind certain aspects. Some people will go on to these cases and don't mind hearing about like robberies and home invasions and stuff, but as soon as you mention sexual assault or something, it's like that's
suicide.
Or suicide. That's what I'm saying, is that they didn't sign up for that kind of thing. So there will be warnings on this one as well. And also I think it will be helpful to have like the suicide hotline, I think, on these kinds of things, which is what I hear other people do, and I think it's a really good idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll put all that stuff in there, and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, it's been another episode. We will talk to you guys next time.
Bye.